Bonjour. Welcome to Native News Online's election recap. My name is Levi Rickert, founder, publisher of Native News Online. I'm joined today by our team of Native News Online's political editorial team. And let me introduce you to Neely Bardwell. She is
Hello.
a graduate of Michigan State University. She's a political editor this year. Welcome, Neely. And let's bring on Marlon White Eagle. Marlon White Eagle he's the former president of the Whole Trunk Nation. He's been serving, covering the political campaign with us this year. So welcome, Marlon. And Sean Griswold. He's a mixture of several pueblos. We'll let him talk about that if he wants. But Sean comes most recently from Source, New Mexico. On election night, he served as co-host for the Indian Country Today's team. And so welcome, Sean. He's been doing some podcasting with us this election season. And so this is our election political team. I'm pretty excited about doing this recap today because there are people asking me questions right and left. And Neely, what are you hearing out there?
I think it's a lot of confusion on a lot of sides. I don't think, because all the polls leading up to the election showed Kamala Harris ahead by a small margin, I will add. So it wasn't by a big margin at all. It wasn't going to be a sweep, but the polls did show Kamala Harris leading. And so when we found out that Trump is the projected winner, it was a little bit confusing, and I think people are ready to see how their communities voted. And I think the Native community is really wondering where all those Native votes came from when it showed in the polls that a lot of Native people voted for Trump instead of Kamala Harris.
Marlon, what are your thoughts on the election?
Yeah, there's a lot of economic impact on the election. There's all through the campaigning, Trump was talking about tariffs, and we're starting to figure out what that means and how that's going to affect each of us individually.
Thank you, Marlon. And Sean.
Yeah, Levi, as we wrap to the end of the week, I feel and hear from people who either worked on the ground and also just family asking, what's going on? What does this mean? Outside of Donald Trump, Trump will be the president next year. That's going to be very clear. We think about some of the experiences we had with the Trump presidency in 2016. We know that a lot of his policies are very much in line to return. That was very consistent in his campaign messaging. We also know that Donald Trump messages do change consistently with however he's thinking and what he does say. So we also are going to have to prepare a little bit for that. What the election means, of course, I think we'll have a few more weeks to kind of see and evaluate where votes are coming from, what issues drove people to the polls. Early speculation, I think, is giving us another example about how sometimes exit polling can be a little bit too presumptive. Seeing certain exit polls that are speculating on entire groups of people in this country as if all those people represent a singular voice. But that stuff we'll learn later on as we see full numbers come in. Ballots have not been certified in any state. There are still some votes that are being counted. And that process is going to take over the course of several weeks into next year, where we do see, as is indicated by Vice President Harris, when Donald Trump is going to have a transfer of power. And yesterday, President Biden acknowledging that he looks to have a peaceful transfer of power is also further signaling to where the country is going to go next. Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting. We'll see. I'm excited about this conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And over the next hour, we will be getting initial reactions from the panel. We have a group of 3 that we're going to use here in a minute, but they will discuss their apprehensions and concerns and exploring where Native Americans can go from here in terms of shaping the political landscape. This is a critical time for Native Americans in that there's a lot at stake here. The discussions of protection of tribal sovereignty, environmental protections, healthcare, education, and more. We're here to unpack the election results. And Sean, I agree with you. We want to have all the answers today. However, I will tell you this to the viewers that Native News Online, as we speak, is conducting a nationwide poll. Neil and I have seen some of the preliminary numbers so far, and they are not consistent with the 2-to-1 margin that NBC has reported Native Americans voted at. I'm not going to reveal what our preliminary numbers looked like. However, I will tell you this, when I looked at them, they were not consistent with the NBC poll. I've gotten calls from around the country, people highly, highly concerned about that poll. And so, and Neil, you were on the telephone with the professor from Northwestern who's helping us with this at the Medill School of Journalism. It's a rigorous process, and I think next week we're going to have a native endoscopy that discusses our process.
Right.
If you're doing it scientifically, you cannot just talk to somebody leaving the exit poll. This has been go ahead, Neil.
It is a very tenuous process, and that is mainly because it is very hard to survey Indian country, and that's for a lot of different reasons. The biggest issue we are coming across in our surveying, we're partnering with Qualtrics, and so the biggest issue we're seeing is the amount of pranksters or people who are not actually native who are taking the poll. And I'm almost wondering if maybe NBC encountered that same issue when doing their poll and then didn't realize that they needed to filter through the respondents who said they were American Indian, just like we are doing, because that is necessary to do when surveying Indian country and really any poll. But I'm sure that because NBC likely doesn't have a strong understanding of the different red flags that come up that show that someone may not be native when they're saying they are. They may not know what those are. And I'm kind of wondering if that has a lot to do with the fact that a lot of Indian country isn't really agreeing with the fact that 65% of Native people voted for Trump. When we know in our communities, the conversations we are having, and quite honestly, many tribes have endorsed Harris. So it was interesting to see, and I'm sure that has a little bit to do with it. Levi, what do you think?
Well, I think that I'm going to rely on the scientific process we are engaging in currently, and therefore I won't reveal or even really talk about it at any great length until we can get our numbers in early part of next week and have a day or two to even analyze them, because I think that's just really critical, and it's fair to Indian country. This will be 4 polls that we have conducted here at Native News Online with the School of Journalism at Northwestern University, done by a third party called Qualtrics. And Qualtrics is very reliable in Indian country, not Indian country, among others throughout the United States and around the world, actually, of being a premier polling company. And so that's why we engage with them. But we will have a comprehensive report that hopefully will be done by the end of the year. There again, we're going to rush to judgment. I really appreciate what you said, Sean. This is some serious business here, that we should not just flippantly say what is out there, and we will analyze it, make a report on it. And so I'm looking forward to releasing that report by the end of the year. But Native Americans, we have, with our tribal sovereignty and other issues, we have the right to be treated fairly and even report on it in a very fair manner, and not just from a stereotypical, this is the way it is. And so I was a little taken back. I was flying back from Washington and started getting calls and texts about the NBC polls. So we're on top of it. So I want our viewers to know that. And without further ado, I do want to introduce our guest. We have 3, but it looks like we lost connection with one. But let's introduce Holly McCarroll, who is she's a friend, she's a political operative, she's a member of the tribal citizen of the Red Lake Nation, and highly respected across Indian country for her many campaigns she's worked on, and even if anything else, just energized to get out the vote in Indian country. And I really respect that. It's so needed. And we're also going to bring on Aaron Payment, and he's to our viewers. He's familiar to you. He's the former chairperson of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe up in the Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, currently on the tribal council there, board of directors. And welcome, Aaron, and welcome, Holly. How are you two today?
I'm good. Thank
Hey,
you.
Holly,
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, why don't you kind of start with some of the your initial reactions to what happened on Tuesday across the general election and across the nation with as it relates to the presidential election and even maybe some of the Native Americans who are running for office. So go ahead, Holly.
Absolutely. If I could, I'd like to comment on the poll question that you were just discussing as
Sure.
well. When I saw that NBC poll came out, and what you really have to do is look down, is drill down into the information that they were sharing. That was a 10-state sample. Five of those states didn't have tribes in them. The other three either had very small communities or really, difficult to geographically diverse and difficult to count. They also, if you drill down, they didn't break out. They went down to Asian and Latino demographics and then other. And so there was no information about how they identified Native Americans or gathered any of that data. So it was also an exit poll, which is not
Correct.
hard data. That is, talking to folks as they exit a poll. So I absolutely hope that Indian country looks at those facts with kind of clear eyes about what that was. That is not hard data, and I don't think will be representative of how Indian country voted. But I also think it underscores, how the collection of data in our communities is still just, in this case, barely a footnote, although they did feel confident enough to put a 64% in there, which with no explanation. What I also found interesting yesterday, even in the New York Times piece, which had a comprehensive kind of initial breakdown of how some communities with the headline of how some communities have changed their voting style or voting direction, the partisan nature of it, and they broke out Native Americans, saying that it was swinging to the right, but again, looking at counties that didn't break out the Native American vote. And to really get a true picture of how Indian country voted and for who, you have to go down to a precinct by precinct level. For instance, if you look at the state of Arizona, which is going to get a lot of attention, right, because it was a battleground state, it is going to look like Navajo County went red. But that is largely because of the southern nature of the demographics of the southern part of that county. And if you go into the precinct by precinct in the northern part of that county, which encompasses the Navajo Nation, the information is very different. And so and there are parts of Indian country that were not part of the battleground states, like let's say Pine Ridge, where if you look on that map, there is an island of blue around Pine Ridge where it went 84-13 for Kamala Harris over Trump. Or if you look at my tribe, Red Lake, in northern Minnesota, there's an island of blue that went 92% for Harris over Trump. And so I think, Indian country really has to look at what these mainstream media articles are looking at, and a lot of times it's just battleground states. But to get a true picture of how Indian country voted, there really has to be, precinct by precinct data from those precincts and those states that, even if they're not battleground, are home to large communities and populations of our people and relatives.
And that's some really powerful insight there, Holly. And I will agree. And I will tell you this, oftentimes, and nothing disparaging against them, but non-native journalists really sometimes don't even know how to report on us. And some of the questions they will ask me if I'm on the campaign trail or whatever, and we start talking, is they ask some really good questions because they will admit they don't always know how to report on or about Indian country. Aaron, what's your perspective on what's happening?
Yeah, I think Holly just gave an amazing analysis. It's so cool to see Indigenous people be so knowledgeable. So great job, Holly. I was I'm happy to actually hear that because that disturbs me. But I do think, it's a little bit of a deja vu all over again. because with the Clinton campaign in 16, there was an effort by tribal leaders to try to get some platform out, and we didn't really see a platform in 16. And then leading up to this campaign, there was a short runway because Biden stepped out at the last minute, and where other candidates would have had a whole year to campaign and kind of ferret out their platform. And 4 years ago, we had a really well-articulated Biden-Harris plan for tribal nations. We didn't have that this time. There were bits and pieces, and there was a lot of effort by the Harris campaign to get to Indian country. And that has a benefit. It has an appeal to tribal leaders. But tribal voters don't always vote the way they perceive tribal leaders are going to vote. And so I think we needed to see more of a platform. One thing that's a missed opportunity is for 2 years, the Biden-Harris administration's been developing a native language revitalization plan. I helped to write that plan, and it's good to go. It's a wonderful plan. It's a commitment, on the heels of the boarding school reports and also the apology. Bringing back our culture and language is part of the solution to heal our communities, to be resilient with the opiate crisis, substance abuse, all of the worst statistics. However, that report has not been published. And now it probably isn't going to be meaningful if the report is published, because I'm not sure how much of it will resonate with the next administration. But it's a very good effort, a very good study that all of the frontline warriors in Indian country and the administration, Brian Newland, Deb Holland, Wheezy Pan, Gary, everybody that worked on it. So I think that understanding what the needs of tribes are and getting the word out earlier is needed. And I think that's a missed opportunity. But we do have a record-setting agenda and what we achieved. And I hope that maybe Trump looks at those stats and thinks, hey, Indians love Trump. And maybe there will be some benefits coming out going forward. But I'm very fearful of the retribution that he's talked about. So we'll see. We'll wait and see.
Yeah, I for one am concerned, apprehensive about the future, and we're having some technical problems, but we have former Vice President Myron Leiser from the Navajo Nation. He is a friend of President Trump's and an advocate. He was. We saw him at the Republican convention, right, Marlene and Sean, you were there, and Leiser was there, and he is an advocate for President Trump, and hopefully he will be a strong advocate for Indian country. So hopefully we can connect up with him on this program. And Sean, tell me this: what are your apprehensions going forward?
Apprehensions that immediately come to mind is, as a journalist covering the Donald Trump administration and the rapid nature of news cycles, of news information, of lawsuits, constant issues of bad governance. It's a really difficult time to report the news because you're trying to give as much viable information to people who are asking for it, for a general audience of people who are also trying to figure out what's going on. Donald Trump has proven he can win elections. He did that twice. We still haven't seen he can govern, and anything out of this campaign and this election cycle and everything that we followed out of the Republican National Convention, I think what stuck to me the most in following in Milwaukee was the consistent tone to bringing back MAGA policies and just stating that that is what they want. But there wasn't any real clear indication as to how it'll work differently. And then seeing how Trump directed the campaign in a very top-down nature shows that he's likely going to lead again like that. And so from right now, even as we're having this conversation about numbers and finding places as who's to blame and what's going on here, it's creating a bit of disorientation for people. And having to step up every day to explain that is going to be tiring. I know we're going to do it the best that we can, but it's going to also cause a lot of harm for a lot of people. And so we can get to the specific issues here. I think as we move even from the space as to like how we got here in terms of the voting, it's clear America wanted this. We can go down as to and even identify loss of of different racial groups who may have decided to go more right. It's consistent. Trump held his base. White America voted for him. They came out for him, and that's what they want. This is a swing and pendulum back to Obama era policies, the Biden administration. And it's going to just slow things down a lot more. And so that's my big apprehension there. Hearing from other people that are close to me, relatives, friends, and family, they have a wide range of issues that go towards healthcare, child Indian welfare, environment protections, and to reasons as to why people may have even voted for Donald Trump. Wallets. How much more money am I going to make next year? Am I going to be able to afford groceries? That's significant across the board.
Yeah. And I want to go to Marlon and Aaron simply because they were actually tribal leaders during the first Trump administration. And Marlon, if you don't mind, how was it on Whole Chunk Nation up in Wisconsin, like when the CARES Act funds were distributed? And I'll make this comment, and Aaron, you may have better perspective than I do even. My understanding that Indian country wasn't even in the first round of conversation when it came to CARES Act. And our Native people really had to fight for that and work through Senator Schumer's office. For what I understand it, who went to the Oval Office, said you've got to write Indian country in. And so, Marlon, what was your experience working with the Trump administration as a elected tribal official?
Yeah, it was pretty pleasant. Obviously during that time we didn't have any White House forums in the first administration of Donald Trump, and then we saw the pause on land into trust was a major issue for a lot of the tribes across the nation. But in terms of the pandemic, it was a little bit slow, but things were processed, and it was obviously it was a pandemic and a very challenging time for everyone.
Yeah, Aaron, you have some good perspective on this. Please tell us.
Yeah. So 35% proposed cuts. I was with NCAI at the time as an executive officer. We met with senior leadership in the incoming administration, and they told us that the President Trump had already directed 35% cuts across the board for Indian country. Also, remember there was before Zinke got in because of all the ethical investigations. Jim Kaysen, who was the architect of no land and trust under the Bush era, had proposed a rule that would give local government say over whether or not our land could go into trust. And while it wasn't framed that way, they said that those tribes that had local support could have priority. And so in many cases, we don't have local support because they're the people who took our land from us, expropriated our land. So I'm really worried about Vance's slip of the tongue about the land grab in Indian country and federal lands. I'm worried about that. Also, under the Trump administration, the ACA, we did not qualify for waivers in Indian country for the work requirement. We get what we get because we prepaid with 2 billion acres of land, and so the ACA benefits that we do get, we prepaid for 100%. And so we weren't asking for welfare. It's owed to us, and the exemption from the work requirement, the Trump administration, HHS administration, interpreted that was a racial thing, and that therefore they couldn't do it because it would be discriminating against other races. So I say that in tongue in cheek. But we did not succeed under that administration with that. So there's a number of things. I'm really worried about the repeal of the ACA, which the Speaker Johnson had alluded to. I think that is coming. I believe somebody posted in your chat here. I do think that's one of the first legislative actions. And for my tribe, that will be cut our health funds in half because third-party revenues has allowed us to increase to 30 million. We have a very large tribe, so that sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but it's not enough to meet the needs. Our annual funding is 30 million, so it's 50-50 now. So tribes need to look at what the fiscal impact is going to be on their health administrations back home if they lose the third-party revenue from the ACA Medicaid expansion. So I've got a lot of trepidation. Maybe he'll say all is well. 60% of the Indians love Trump, and then therefore we won't be targeted. But we were not on his radar on some things last time. But I do think we're definitely in the sights this time.
Holly, what insight do you have in terms of apprehensions of moving forward and first Trump administration versus what maybe we have to look forward to?
You know, I really thought during the first Trump administration, in spite of all of our anxiety given, you know, his historical comments about tribes and Indians as he was seeking to expand his gaming operations on the East Coast in Atlantic City, if I recall correctly, you know, they were racist and uninformed, and um, I think there were we almost suffered from, well, maybe flourished or I wouldn't say flourished, but did better from some degree of benign neglect during the first Trump administration. He really, I think it caught he and his team by surprise that they won, just like the rest of the country. And then it often appeared as if many of the decisions, political, well, there were obviously some high-profile IG investigations there as well when politics did become involved, but the political appointees were left to really make a lot of their own decisions, and really without, as Aaron noted, the policy guidelines of an administration to guide them. So this time, I am a bit more concerned given the experience that his team has. It's a much more professional and organized operation. This campaign, I mean, they've really transformed the electoral landscape of America with the victories, in these some of these traditionally, the blue wall states or the Democratic Sun Belt. So what is in store for us, I think. If you look at what he says he's going to do on the first day in terms of deportations and on the border, then the tribal communities that live along the border need to make sure that their voices are heard and tribal sovereignty is respected, and their family and relatives that live on both sides of the border are still allowed the passage that is provided to them under the Jay Treaty. So that is, I think, probably number one. We have a big tax bill coming up. There are several Indian country interests that need to be considered in the tax bill, and we have to protect tribal interests there as well. So, I fear that we may be in more danger in the second administration because it is a much more polished operation with some very clear priorities for what Trump wants to get done this time around.
Yeah. And looks like we lost Neely. let's go back to you, Sean. Sean, what do you know about what happened? I'm going to pivot a little bit here. What happened on Navajo Nation on Tuesday that required the tribal council to petition, and I believe the president as well, petition the Superior Court to extend voting for 2 hours. And that's an issue that I think that we're going to investigate more. But what do you know about what happened and what can be done to stop this in the future?
Yeah, it was voter interference, suspected safety threat. It was part of a couple other incidents that happened across the country. Several precincts in Georgia that are historically Black voting districts had similar incidents of bomb threats made that were hoaxes. Thankfully, there were not serious threats made, but it did disrupt the voting cycle. There were also issues with printers. On top of the safety concerns where ballots were not being printed properly, or there was not enough printer toner and paper, that happened in several precincts in the Four Corners area around the Navajo Nation in Arizona. So not only did it include or have to involve the Arizona Secretary of State to intervene, the Navajo Nation president as well did intervene on behalf of his citizens, did file an issue in court. They did extend voting hours for 2 hours for several precincts that are around Window Rock, so the heart of Navajo Nation voter area. And these are all also predominantly Nez voters, as Holly was saying. You can go and look at these precincts, and as votes are still being counted in these spaces, predominantly heavy for Harris for Jonathan Nez, who was running as a Democrat in that congressional seat. So interference, and It's just one of several that occurred over that night across the country, and that's from what we know about it. Of course, we'll have to continue to follow further investigation through the Arizona Secretary of State. I'm not sure if the federal government has been involved yet, but that's something that I'd be curious to know if that's going to be referenced up to the FBI.
Mm-hmm. Man, I think that the notion that they ran out paper ballots and is consistent with what I heard from a state senator from Oglala Sioux. She represents the Oglala Sioux area. She told me several election cycles ago that is a problem on Pine Ridge, where Native voters show up and there's not enough ballots, printed ballots. And to me, that is a form of voter suppression. And so I just think that I was literally at the Harris Watch Party in Washington, D.C. at Howard University, and I started getting notifications on my phone about what was going on. And so I was in contact with people on Navajo. But I think it's something that the native, like the National Congress of American Indians, does a great job on GOTV efforts, and Judith LeBlanc's group, Native Organizers Alliance. We need to really take a really strong look at avoiding this in the future. And I don't think I've ever heard of any non-native polling stations running out printed ballots. So, Holly, could you talk about that? And Aaron, I'd like to hear your response.
Yeah, hearing you talk about that, it's odd we never hear that story from, predominantly white communities. It seems they only run out of ballots in Indian country, paper ballots or printer problems. And so I agree. It reminds me of the 2002 race for Tim Coleman, and several of us were Tim Johnson. And in the Senate race, when he was running against John Thune that year, and when South Dakota went to bed that night, it looked like John Thune was winning, but they hadn't counted the votes from Pine Ridge yet because they didn't count the votes on the res. You had to take them off, whereas other folks could count the votes, call them in. Nope, not the Indians, not the Indian vote. You had to drive them an hour off the reservation where they could be counted at the county seat. And so they were counted late that night. And when South Dakota woke up the next morning, Tim Johnson was ahead of John Thune by 532 votes. And there was outrage over how the Indians had cheated, but it was their own rules that ensured the Indian vote came in late. So, there are structural and systemic forms of oppression that really does keep down the native vote. NARF, the folks at NARF do such a great job of both, getting the information out there, recruiting folks to go out and do poll watching. I really think, at the state legislature level where, many voting laws are passed, we need to have more information, better education, and just a lot more advocacy in these states with high Native American populations in specific counties.
Aaron.
I think we should go to Myron because he's here now.
Oh, Myron's here. Hey, there he is.
Oh, man. Thank you. My apologies, but I can't apologize when I'm at the mercy of my own internet here. So it is.
I would agree. And yeah, let me introduce you, the former Vice President of the Navajo Nation, Myron Lizer. And he and I have developed a friendship through the years, and I saw him at the Republican National Convention. I interviewed him, and he is a Trump supporter. And welcome, Mr. Vice President. Tell us this: what's your reaction to what happened on Tuesday?
Oh man, well, been working diligently, a lot of energy, a lot of long hours helping the cause. I was recently featured on the stage at a Trump rally in Albuquerque last week, and gave a message. I'll let everybody know that I didn't recite the speech that I was given on the teleprompter. They wanted me to speak other messages, and I didn't think it was relevant for a tribal leader to recite those words. I had just 2-3 minutes to really bring hope, provide encouragement, and let President Trump know that Indian country is out there, and we have a lot of valid issues. We have a lot of history of just government failing us and broken promises, broken treaties, on and on and on. We still continue to have a seat at the table. I guess that was always my argument. Being a Republican, and then becoming the vice president of the Navajo Nation, is our trajectory should always be up and up. Enhancing the quality of life in Indian country, not only on Navajo but all the 574 federally recognized tribes. And so, staying relevant and keeping my nose clean, my powder dry to a point. It really helped me get to that stage where I was actually on stage and provided comments and support. And so I was excited, obviously, but now the real work begins. Roll up our sleeves and really let's work together. And that was my message on stage at the Trump rally in Albuquerque.
Well, let me ask you this: since the election, have you been contacted by Trump people to solicit your opinions or advice on how they can work within Indian country in the second Trump administration? Have you had any contact with them?
Yes, the contact is ongoing, collaborative, and of course, trying to again garner more significance for all of our issues, all the plight of Indian country here. How do you? It's like drinking through the proverbial 2-inch fire hose of water. Tremendous pressure of just narrative coming out. A lot of it, all seemingly just our top priorities. And we have a lot of ceiling, we have a lot of upside with regard to the Republicans and any work that we could do bipartisanly, partisanly. That's my goal, is trying to make Republican and Indian country a partisan approach, just like the Democrats have in the past have been very successful in that regard. And, we need one another. To recite a part of my speech in Albuquerque there last week, Indian proverb, the left wing and the right wing are of the same bird. And really, it was my message to the Republicans that and I fully expected Trump to win. Call it brashness, call it confidence, I guess. Seeing the tide turn, and then it was revealed in those numbers. Even though we are 1% of the voting bloc in these great United States, 64% of the Native American voted red, voted for President Trump. I think it harkens to see the tremendous, I guess, opportunity that many of our own people, our brothers and sisters all across Turtle Island here, see that this time let's do it right. President Trump, 4 years ago, we saw some advances. Biden Harris, to their credit, they advanced Indian country a lot, and now Trump and Vance, they are in queue now. It's their time. So how can we, those of us who are friendlies, so to speak, we're on the Trump team, but we need one another. Certainly getting messaging, getting policy recommendations, getting rid of the hierarchy of layers and layers of federal bureaucracy that has stymied advancement in Indian country. I'm all about that. I want to help our plight from the years past, and I get it. Everything that we can hold against federal government is seemingly been attributed to the Republican, but they've done a lot in the past to help Indian country. It's just not readily out there. People don't ascribe to it. My bent is economic development, and I think we stand a lot to garner now with the Trump administration, a businessman, as many would say. We get on the radar, we get on their priorities, we get on Speaker Johnson's priority, his agendas. How do we bring, just like I said in my speech again, President Trump, we want to be invited to the American dream. When likes of immigrants coming in legally, legal immigrants like Vivek Ramaswamy can come and be totally successful. I believe that Indian country, we should marshal out a plan. So I hearken that to our federal partners, our federal family, that Indian country is that last frontier. Every pandemic has changed the way society operates. This is our time where we let the world know that Indian country, we're ready, we're willing, and we're able to advance all measures. If companies are looking to reshore, come to Indian country. We have the land, we have the resources. If the federal government would have let us tap into them more readily, we are sovereign. Who out there would use our sovereignty, and that's a bad word, I don't mean it in a derogative sense by any means, who would like to use our sovereignty as an unfair or a competitive advantage? That's what I'm interested in. Those are the discussions that I'm pursuing currently.
Well, let me ask you this. I'm going to go to Aaron. What, who else should we be talking to in Indian country who's on the Trump team, so to speak? Is it Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, or is there a group of you that are discussing the future of Indian country as it relates to the Trump administration?
Yes, and as you can imagine, Senator Mark Wayne Mullen is vital. He was on the campaign trail with Don Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard and others. Bobby Kennedy. I have a meeting waiting in queue, as if in queue, to meet with Bobby Kennedy and about 20 prominent Indian country leaders. What he wants to do, and this was all set in motion before he endorsed President Trump. And can you imagine, after he did that, his floodgates probably opened. He's been campaigning all across America. I think Bobby Kennedy holds a lot of substance here, and namely for he wants to make America healthy again. Hey, Indian country would sign up for that 20 times. As our health is really obesity and diabetes and all the ailments that really limit us from enjoying a more robust life and longevity as well. And so I think there's significance there with Bobby Kennedy being on the team. Early on, I kind of thought he might head up HHS or he might go to USDA. I'm seeing now otherwise that somebody else is in line for a USDA, a true farmer in his own right. I think there's just a lot to gain. And again, it's mine and whoever out there wants to collaborate that we should push nothing's changed. We should still continue pushing Indian country issues forward. This time with confidence and with, I guess, maybe a little patience early on. The first time that President Trump was in office, he was a businessman, didn't really know the government. I think he was maybe naive to a point by his own recognition that he's an admission. He says that, there were some people that were put in office that didn't have his interests in mind, and they ended up writing books and selling millions of copies so that, obviously their heart wasn't in the right place. So second time around, hindsight being 2020, and if he gets the Senate and the House, I imagine the things he could do. And we want Indian country to be there first and foremost. We're going to work hard, feverishly to make that happen, but we still can't exclude anybody out there. A lot of people on this call, you have a very passionate offering that we could garner from. And I think, we wish to go forward with that kind of confidence and zeal, but I think Indian country is standing right there on a perch right now for those to take up. We have a lot of partners right now chiming in. If you can imagine, my phone has been ringing off the hook, interviews and other things that are out there. But I want to hearken out to 2010. President Obama signed a defense authorization bill into law, way down nestled in the page 1000 and something in this Defense Appropriation Act of 2010. House Resolution Bill 3326 was an apology to Indian country. It was signed into law, but if it's not being recognized, what's the significance of it? It is law, but certainly not observed. And so we want to bring that to President Trump's early attention. And I believe that a lot of this becomes more spiritual too. For me, I'm a pastor, I'm a businessman, I'm a community leader, I'm a former tribal leader. I think we hit on many, many vital issues here, and I want to bring that to bear. That Defense Authorization Bill of 2010. It is law, but it's unrecognized right now. I urge you to kind of do some background research on that. HR 3326. We want to help former Governor Brownback elevate that to the highest levels. President Trump.
I was Myron. I was actually in Washington D.C. when Mark Charles read that apology on the National Mall, because I'm very aware of that. So. Question: have you been offered a position in the new government? Then I'm going to switch you over to Garrett or Aaron. Have you been offered a position?
Not yet. There's been hints of it from various respectable and good sources. I'm standing the ready for what may come. I will be a strong advocate for Indian country, for economic development. I think we should be Indian country. And tribal nations. We should be leading every vital discussion from energy.
I agree.
We should be
and I would encourage you to please reach out to the National Congress of American Indians, NARF. All the organizations work so hard for us. So So, Aaron, would you have a question for Myron? Then we're going to go to Neely.
Yeah, it's a question, but it's also a plea, I guess. So, Mr. Vice President, from a former tribal leader to a tribal leader, or vice versa, and I do have faith that you will try to advocate for tribal nations. One of the big issues is dual taxation. There's a lot of unfairness with tribes. Sharice does her job a little bit differently than other Democrats, so if we can help convey that messaging of the unfair practice of that to tribal nations, please, please, please protect our land. The last time the Jim Kaysen, before Zinke could get appointed, had put a moratorium basically on land and trust, and then also had proposed to give local governments a say in whether or not we get prioritized for our land and trust. Local government should have no say in it because they're the people who generally took our land. When I met with President Trump, one of the first 8 tribal leaders that met with him, I tried to pitch this idea that let's post in the Federal Register the permitting process, take the Department of Interior out of it, let tribal nations be the permitting entities just like states are. So treat us no different or less than states, and let us do our own permitting according to some federal regulations. That kind of went right over his head. He said, well, we got to have some regulations. And I'm like, okay, you just missed the small government and decentralized government argument I made. But, please advocate for that. We are completely reliant on the ACA. You know that we traded 2 billion acres of our land in exchange for health, education, and social welfare. So the ACA and the benefits we get out of that are we're entitled to that. We prepaid for that, not entitled. I know that's a bad word. So, we've built up our budgets based on third-party revenue, Medicaid expansion. So if there's a way we can convince the administration to give us amnesty, whatever they're going to do to dismantle the ACA, maybe fully fund IHS. Maybe that would be the solution. And
That would be
then
great.
one final area is school of choice. We have the worst graduation rates across the country out of any racial ethnic group. We prepaid for our education. We're the only Americans with the right to an education, but we have the worst grade report. And so we deserve school of choice. So maybe it's through the BIA or something else, but rather than us failing in public schools, we need a school of choice concept. I know that's not traditionally a Democrat concept. It's definitely a Republican concept. I'm on the National Advisory Council on Indian Education. We did report these ideas to Secretary DeVos, but it didn't go anywhere. So maybe this is our opportunity to demonstrate what Trump can do for Indian country and get us educated and fulfill the treaty and trust obligation for education by giving us a choice of who educates us. We can educate ourselves, and we can do much better than the public schools. So that's my pitch. Thank you.
I agree. I appreciate it. Thank you, Aaron.
And Neil, sir, do you want to? Yeah, you have something more.
Small response. I think all things should be on the table. Hopefully, President Trump is going to help us in that regard. I want to allude to the fact that when he does take office, he's already said so. Go online, look. He wants to streamline government. In the past, his some of the things that look promising to us, to some of your plight there, as he repositioned the Bureau of Reclamation, and I think it was BLM. To Colorado, right? Maybe he could move BIA to Arizona or Oklahoma. Get the
Michigan
closer to us. So Michigan, yeah.
Neely, to you.
Well, rightfully so. I think a lot of tribes and tribal leaders are concerned for another Trump presidency, and since you have a close connection with the Trump presidency and the administration, I was wondering what advice you have for other tribal leaders who may be concerned about their working relationship, nation to nation, when Trump is in office. What advice would you give to those tribal leaders?
Well, the relationships that they already do have, and I know it is suspect in all of Indian country mind right now. I've been told that Trump is keeping receipts. Those that have supported him to this point, he's really going to work with. I'm one of those. I'm one of the probably few. I and Carlisle Begay and several others that are still, I guess, good seed. I'll use those terms in a light way. And I don't mean to minimize any of the tribal efforts. And for me, my calling card is relationship, and I think through relationships you can certainly educate and re-educate, but you can certainly offer some correction, offer some ability to influence. And so through that, I would encourage some of the tribes to go out and start working with the vice president as well as the president and their staff, and prayerfully, hopefully, because I know, government is one of those things. It's either you're hot or you're cold. There's no lukewarm, and if you're lukewarm, you're insignificant, right? But this is a time where true bipartisan, if everybody says let's work together, if the healing in the nation is going to happen, we certainly do have to ascribe our hearts to that. And so, again, using all my gifts, all my talents, and using my network, I will continue to advocate for Indian country. We've been left behind. If I remember 2020, President Trump's Indian country platform was forgotten peoples no more. We need to amplify that again, but we also need to add some more meat to that, and some more, I guess, authority and some more insight. And so with that comes time, with that comes patience. 4 years is not enough to do a lot of work, but with a Senate and a House majority, I think big things can be done, and we'll be working hard to make that.
Hey, Vice President Eliza, and I have gone on record, I've written this, and I really believe it to be true. President Biden has done more for Indian country than any president in the history. And you can start with the appointment of Secretary Deb Haaland. You can cite I believe it's six federal judges that he nominated. And I know Danes did a block on a very qualified one. But in that regard, President Biden has nominated more than half of all federal judges who are Native American in the history of the United States. How do we keep that momentum going under the Trump administration?
Well, certainly, I think I would start recruiting at the all those recent JD laureate graduates and those that are working for the prominent law firms out there. Definitely develop a conservative approach and mentality. You have to using some modern and some old time warfare strategy. You have to know your and I use this term lightly, is that you have to know your enemy, right? And so we need to become fully aware of both parties' approaches, and definitely, I do agree that President Biden did a lot of good for Indian country, and that was always my tension, But my bent on that was always, how can we get the Republicans to do just the same? We need one another, and so again, it's a heavy lift, seemingly, but maybe not. I think it's our time. This is where I put on my other cap. My spiritual cap. 50 years ago, next year, March 18, 1975, Billy Graham spoke to tribal leaders in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he alluded to the sleeping giant. He was talking about us Native people, that one day we would awaken and arise into our rightful place as leaders in this country. I see people listening to us now. Again, some might say, "Well, you're just being, a Republican, conservative. You're trying to sell us." I really believe this. Those words are almost gospel to tribal leaders, those that are Christians in the faith here. This is what we've been waiting for, and so there's a lot of scripture out there. They say that President Trump is more spiritually alert now, awakened after those 2 attempts on his life. I believe our Creator, God, has got his ear, he's got his attention. How can we approach in that regard our prayers? I believe we as First Nations people, our Creator set us here on this continent, North America, or for us, Turtle Island, and we are still here. Our prayers are powerful. And so if we could unify in our prayers, our approach, I believe that we can garner even magnified, multiplied significance, because we are host people. We're the First Nations. We were here before anybody else was. How can we, elevate that message of unity, of love, of great fellowship? And when I say that, I hearken back to when the Puritans came, escaping religious persecution. They came and landed at Plymouth Rock there. Our people that were there, our ancestors, were awaiting a new song to come across the waters, and they received these very readily, and there was great fellowship. The greed, the lust in their eyes and their hearts saw and then took, and I get it. We can't minimize that, but how do we heal? And so reconciliation and healing can come when we're all working together.
And to our viewers, I just want to mention that we have a little lag time with the Vice President's feed, looks like, and it speaks to the issues we have in Indian country with broadband. So enough said on that. Sean Griswold, why don't we go over to Sean, and then I'd like to get Holly with a question in Marlin for the president, so Vice President. So
can I say that real quick? I got a Starlink right now, so I got to take this up with Elon Musk here real soon.
Yeah, well, that's actually the transition I was thinking about. I think Myron, all the work you've done to line up with MAGA politics, to be on supportive of the campaign trail, to be a surrogate to what you're sharing with us as being somebody who has knowledge about Indian country for this Trump administration and for President Trump himself. So thank you for being able to sit here and share what you know. And that's what I'm curious about. You mentioned RFK and somebody you plan to meet with, you said, who's going to talk about potential reform with healthcare. And we've seen that reported. Elon Musk is somebody I'm fascinated about, because in New Mexico, where I'm at, he's actively working with tribal governments that have leaned progressive, that are in doing elements that are above, I look at it as some sovereign capitalism, because they're using sovereignty rights to have businesses that may compete with state interests or are even different than the law the state may provide here. So, and we've heard Elon Musk be described as somebody who is not only active with the Trump transition, but somebody who may be even looking at reforming how the government is functioning. What does he learn from Indian country? Are you aware of any conversations he's having about this sort of capitalism that is a little bit different for tribal nations than it can be for their neighbors in the more traditional U.S. zip codes?
Your question, Sean, is spot on. I alluded to this about 3 or 4 years ago in our Nez Leiser administration for Navajo, that our sovereignty, I believe, we protect it. Yeah, sovereignty is about the only thing we own, right? We own our sovereignty, our language, our culture, and our traditions. It's about all we own, right? We don't own the land. But I think that when I hearken to getting working on a meeting with Elon, I think he's such a high-level thinker. He probably could develop workarounds, just like he did, to your point, Sean. He's selling vehicles right now in a state that bars car manufacturers from selling directly to the public. He's working with Nambe Pueblo. Kudos to them, their leadership, and Sandia Pueblo, not to be outdone. They saw what they did with the old casino building. They refurbished it and developed a showroom. And again, not to be outdone, the sister tribe Sandia Pueblo says, we're going to one-up you. We're going to do better. Elon, what do you need? Well, we need a showroom and a service center to work on those cars, as they sell them. So again, they circumvented state law, to your point, and they're now selling vehicles. That's their model. That's what keeps them in business. And I think that was brilliant. What else can he help us do? I'm thinking, because Trump is going to set tariffs up immediately, right? Advancing American companies, Elon Musk, even himself, by his own admittance, is saying, well, maybe I'll hold off on that giga plant in Mexico. Why can't he come to Indian country? Navajo, I mean, we're 27,000 square miles. Other tribes are near the resources that they need. There's a bad word in Indian country, lithium, right? On all the rare earths and precious minerals that it takes to make these car batteries. Well, Indian country could be leading the way in this with the proper remediation mindset for remediating lands, keeping the land pristine. Who better to be an environmental justice person, than Indian country, and at that, a Republican, kind of hearkening that. So I think there's just a lot of opportunity here. Again, we need jobs. We need, and then I'm not gonna lie. I'm sentimental to Navajo. I have been a former tribal leader, but I think Indian country now, this is where we let the world know that we're open for business. Those that want to, those that are a little bit more progressive, we're open for business. We need jobs. We need the resources, and we don't want to be always going to the federal government with our hand out thing. We need money for public safety, which we do. We need money for education, which we do. We've established that on this call. I think that we'd love to be self-reliant and self-resilient, and which we are. Self-resilient, self-reliant part is we're depending on the government for too many things. I think our time has come where we start bringing worthwhile projects to the masses. If you're looking to reshore, come to North America. Much more, come to Indian country. I think we could help those companies that are open to working with us, and we could advance our measures on many facets, many fronts, many segments.
Yeah, and we are all about increasing economic development in the Indian country. Holly, I'm going to let you have a question and go to Marlon, and we're going to wrap this program up. And Vice President, we may have to get you on a native Badashki in the near future as you get more information about what's happening with the transition team. Holly, back to you.
I guess this is our closing thoughts. I think that one of the takeaways from election 2024 is the remarkable number of Native American candidates that we had running for office. And that is a really important thing to see. Jonathan Nez, I know he's still counting votes. Some folks have called it for Eli Crane, but I want to give a shout out for what a terrific campaign he ran in that race. I think he raised over $5 million. That was, I think, a testament to what Native candidates who are resourced, who have the support, and really know how to run a race can change the narrative in what is traditionally defined as a very red state. I also am hearing these same arguments, these same complaints, I guess, that I hear every 4 years that I have for the last 25 plus years that I've been doing this work, that, complaining about what the parties don't do. And I really want to say that, the parties are never going to provide the sort of infrastructure and long-term investment in Indian country to support the Native vote and for us in building our own communities' indigenous political power. And that Indian country and tribal governments really have to take that on ourselves to invest in supporting our Native vote so that we get voter registration lists, that we have experienced folks who know how to turn out the vote, that we have systems in place that train people how to run for office, how to raise money, how to craft a message, all of those things. So I think that election 2024 was really, really a new high watermark for us, and also is showing us where we need to do some work in the coming years. Thank you for having me, Levi.
Yeah, thank you, Holly. And Marlon, question or closing remarks?
Okay, yeah, I have a question for Myron. Hey, Myron, good to see you, and congratulations to your party on the election of Donald Trump. And I'm remembering back to the RNC when we had some open ears and of the Republicans that could. But I guess just to get to my question, there are some opportunities and dangers with the Republican Party potentially having the White House, the Senate, and the House. What's your take on what are some of the dangers and what are some of the opportunities?
Oh my gosh, I think that's far-ranging, and definitely there's fears, and but there's some concerns, and obviously we want to have a true seat at the table, right? Tribal consultation, many of us would hold to that, and we do need that, and to put our issues forward. And so really we just want to have come to see and talk about what is being planned, and how do we appease both sides. And I mean, if we all read The Art of the Deal, President Trump's book, from way back when, I mean, where is win-win? How does everybody come away with something that they could be happy with? So those are all future discussions, and to some of those the opportunities, myriad opportunities. To the dangers, maybe we shouldn't pose them as dangers, but concerns. Just to be heard, right? I mean, sometimes messaging, vernacular, attitude, and posture is really all that matters in the boardroom, in the back room, in those halls where people are talking. So everybody's got something to gain, everybody's got something to lose. And so I think true negotiations need to set forth open minds, open hearts, willingness to work together, and again, where is win-win in all of these issues and dangers and opportunities?
And let me close this down. We've been here over an hour, and of course, it's not like television. We have the flexibility, but in view of everybody's time, I want to thank everybody who's here today, and I want to thank our Native News Online staff. You've done a tremendous job. Many of us put many hours, miles, going across Indian country. I know I spent 12 and a half hours with former President Nez on Monday, and I will cherish that day for a long time. I say it sincerely because I got to know somebody who I already had great admiration for, and if he doesn't make it this time, he would make a fantastic congressman at some point, because Indian country needs strong advocates such as Jonathan Nez. And to Holly, Aaron, and Vice President Lizer, I really do appreciate you coming on. And Mr. Vice President, all of you provided really great insights, but thank you, especially to you, Vice President, for bringing us kind of inside the Trump camp, so to speak, so we can kind of figure out what's going on. Quite frankly, many of us are very apprehensive. Take offense to him calling Senator Warren Pocahontas. I'll just be honest; it's very offensive. And if you have any say, I'd love for you to tone that man down on some of those issues, because just not right in how he treats people. And so with that, I want to thank our viewers for tuning in today. And this is a very important live stream, and our editorial staff will continue. We'll have another one in the next week. I know that OJ Siemens could not be here today, and he's willing to come on next week to have more discussion about this election. So look forward to it, and we'll post it on our Facebook or our website, and we will do that in the future, because these have been a real critical election for us. And as we noted, some of us are very apprehensive about the future. So thank you very much. And I want to thank our sponsors for our election coverage. And it starts with first dollars we received was from OJ, from Forward Directions, Native Vote, and then the National Congress of American Indians and the MacArthur Foundation really helped us cover elections in Indian country. Very, very essential. We all know it. We need to have a voice, a native vote, our native voice. We need to be at the table, as Vice President Lizer said. So, Chi Miigwech for tuning in, and we'll see you next time from Native News Online.
Oh, yeah.